The hull groaned around me. Not the gentle creaking you get in shallow water. This was different. Deeper. The kind of sound that made you remember you were sitting in a metal sphere surrounded by pressure that could crush a car into a briefcase. I checked the depth gauge. 3,200 meters, and still dropping. The descent always got to me at this point. 17 years doing technical dives, 12 of those in deep-sea submersibles, and I still felt my chest tighten when the numbers climbed past 3,000. Not panic. Just awareness. Down here, there wasn't any margin for error. The external lights cut through maybe 15 feet of water before the blackness swallowed everything. Particulate matter drifted past the viewports. Marine snow, we called it. Dead plankton and organic waste settling toward the bottom. I'd watched it on hundreds of dives. Never got less strange, seeing that constant downward rain in the middle of absolute nothing. 3,500 meters. My breathing sounded loud in the confined space. The recycling system hummed its steady rhythm, scrubbing carbon dioxide and feeding oxygen back into the mix. I'd learned to tune it out years ago, but tonight every sound felt amplified. Maybe because the whole situation was wrong from the start. I'd been 3 days into shore leave when the call came. Porto, Portugal. First real time off in 8 months. I'd found this cafe near the Douro River, was working through my second coffee and a pastel de nata, watching the boats and not thinking about pressure hulls or fiber optic splicing or anything deeper than which museum to visit next. Then my phone lit up. Mickey Fox, Director of Atlantic Operations, calling my personal cell, not going through dispatch protocols. I'd almost let it go to voicemail. Wong. His voice had that clipped edge he got when money was bleeding. I need you on the next flight to the Azores. I'm on leave, Mickey. Not anymore. We've got a situation. 3 miles of the TAT-14 are down. Complete signal loss. I'd set down my coffee. The transatlantic telecommunications cable, Route 14. One of the major arteries carrying data between Europe and North America. Millions of transactions per second. Financial markets, communications, streaming services, everything. What's the damage assessment? I'd asked. That's what you're going to find out. Every hour this stays down, we're losing. He'd paused. We're losing a lot. I need my best technician down there. My best technician. Mickey knew how to work people. Knew I'd spent more hours at depth than anyone else on the company roster. Knew I'd done splices in conditions that would have sent other operators back to the surface. Knew I'd say yes. 3,800 meters. The pressure gauge showed numbers that most people couldn't wrap their heads around. 376 atmospheres. Nearly 5,500 pounds per square inch pressing against every surface of the hull. The viewport glass was 7 inches thick, and still I caught myself not looking directly at it. Irrational. But there it was. I'd made the flight. 32 hours from Porto to Terceira, then a helicopter ride to the support vessel Ocean Surveyor. Mickey had met me at the helipad, not even letting me drop my bag before walking me through the situation. Started 6 hours ago, he'd said, leading me toward the operations center. Complete dropout on all fiber pairs. No degradation, no warning, just gone. Environmental event? Seismic activity? Nothing on the monitors. Weather's been clear. This is the deep, abyssal plain. Geologically stable. Equipment failure? Mickey's jaw had tightened. That's the problem. The cable's only 8 years old. Armored construction, rated for 50-year deployment. It shouldn't fail. But it had. And every hour it stayed dark. The company bled money. penalty clauses with telecommunications providers, lost revenue, competitors circling to pick up contracts. Mickey had looked at me directly. You've done more deep-sea splices than anyone in the company's 40-year history. I need you down there. I need you to assess the damage, and I need you to fix it. Today. 4,000 meters. The depth alarm chimed softly. I silenced it and adjusted my descent rate, bleeding air from the ballast tanks. The seafloor should be coming up soon. Sonar showed it at 4,100 meters, the abyssal plain that stretched for hundreds of miles in this region. My hands moved through the pre-landing checklist automatically. External lights to full intensity. Manipulator arms unlocked and tested. Camera systems active. Tool storage verified. Splice kit secured and ready. I'd done this sequence so many times it didn't require conscious thought anymore. Which was good, because part of my mind was still turning over the whole situation. 3 miles of cable. That wasn't a single failure point. That was extensive damage. The kind of thing you saw when a trawler dragged its nets across a shallow installation, or when an anchor fouled a line near port. But we were 200 nautical miles from the nearest shipping lane. 4,000 meters down, where nothing dragged anything. The sonar pinged. Bottom at 50 meters and rising to meet me. I cut the descent, letting the submersible settle into neutral buoyancy. The lights caught the seafloor as it came into view, flat, featureless sediment the color of old concrete. A few pale anemones dotted the landscape, their tentacles waving in currents I couldn't feel. 4,040 meters. I vented more air, dropping the last distance slowly. The skids touched down with barely a bump. Sediment puffed up in clouds around the submersible, then settled. I was down. Ocean Surveyor. This is Deepwater 1. On the bottom at 4,040 meters. Beginning damage survey. Copy that, Deepwater 1. Catherine Santos, the communications officer. Professional, calm. I'd worked with her before on the Gibraltar deployment. She knew her job. Director Fox wants a full assessment before you start repairs. Understood. Starting survey now. I engaged the propulsion system, lifting the submersible a few meters off the bottom. The navigation display showed the cable's projected path, a straight line running northeast to southwest across the plain. The company's tracking data put the first breakpoint 300 meters from my landing position. I pushed forward, following the coordinates. The seafloor slid past beneath me, monotonous, empty. This far down, life existed in scattered pockets, chemosynthetic bacteria, the occasional deep-sea fish, amphipods the size of my hand. But mostly it was just mud and darkness, and cold, that would freeze exposed flesh in seconds. 200 meters, 150. The cable came into view. It lay across the sediment in a straight line, exactly where it should be. Black armor coating, half a foot in diameter, designed to protect the delicate fiber optic strands inside from pressure, abrasion, and the occasional curious shark. I followed it forward looking for the break, found it 30 meters later. I stopped the submersible, stared at what the light showed me. The cable had been cut, not frayed, not crushed, not pulled apart by seismic stress. Cut. The end showed a clean cross-section, the armor severed in a straight line, the internal components neatly exposed. I moved closer, bringing the external cameras to bear. The cut was too precise, too clean. It looked almost surgical, the way the armor had been penetrated without deformation or stress fracturing. Ocean Surveyor. I've found the first breakpoint. The cable's been severed. Copy, Deepwater 1. What's your assessment of the cause? I looked at the cut again. Tried to think of any natural process that would produce this result. Came up empty. Unknown at this time. The damage is, unusual. I need to survey the full extent before I can determine cause. I moved forward again, following the cable. Found the other end of the cut 20 meters ahead. The same clean cross-section, like something had simply removed a section of cable and dropped both ends back to the seafloor. But the cable was still there. Nothing had been removed. This was just a cut. I kept going. Found the next break 400 meters ahead. Same clean cut. Same precision. And the next one, 350 meters beyond that. And another. And another. I spent the next 40 minutes traversing the damage path, documenting each breakpoint. 12 cuts total, spaced at intervals ranging from 300 to 500 meters. Every single one showing that same surgical precision. My chest felt tight again, and it had nothing to do with the depth. Ocean Surveyor, Deepwater 1. I've completed the damage survey. Go ahead, Deepwater 1. 12 separate cut points along a 3-mile section of cable. The damage is consistent across all breakpoints. Clean cuts through the armor and internal components. No evidence of environmental stress or equipment failure. The spacing appears deliberate. Silence on the other end. I waited, watching sediment drift past the viewports. Catherine's voice came back. Deepwater 1, stand by. I sat there, hovering above the last cut point, looking at that impossibly clean cross-section, trying to think of any explanation that made sense. The radio crackled. Deepwater 1, Director Fox wants you to begin repairs immediately. Start with the northeastern breakpoint and work your way back. I keyed the transmit. Catherine, did he hear my assessment? This damage pattern isn't consistent with any failure mode I've seen. We should probably... Director Fox's instructions are to begin repairs immediately, regardless of cause. Her voice stayed professional, but I caught something underneath. Discomfort, maybe. The priority is restoring service. Investigation can follow. I looked at the cut again, at that precise, inexplicable line through armored cable designed to withstand damn near anything the deep ocean could throw at it. Every instinct I had said this was wrong. That starting repairs before we understood what caused this was a mistake. But Mickey was right about one thing. Every hour the cable stayed dark, the losses mounted, and I'd been pulled off leave specifically because I could do this work faster than anyone else. Copy that, Ocean Surveyor. Returning to the first splice point now. I brought the submersible around, heading back northeast. The navigation system plotted the course. 15 minutes transit time to the first break. The hull groaned again as I moved through the water. That same deep sound, metal under pressure. I tried not to think about what could cut through armored cable 4,000 meters down. Tried to focus on the work ahead. The splice procedure I'd done hundreds of times. Clean the ends, align the fibers, weld the armor, test the connection. Methodical. Routine. The first breakpoint appeared in my lights. I brought the submersible into position, adjusting altitude until I hovered directly over the severed ends. The manipulator arms extended, tools gripped and ready. I took a breath. Released it slowly. Then I started welding. I'd been working the splice for about 30 minutes when the sonar display caught my attention. Just a flicker at first, easy to miss if you weren't watching. But I was watching. Down here, you watched everything. The console sat to my left. Navigation and detection systems clustered together in a panel I could monitor while manipulating the repair tools. Depth, temperature, current velocity, proximity sensors, and sonar, painting the world beyond my viewport in concentric rings of green phosphorescence. Something massive was circling at the edge of detection range. I stopped mid-motion, the port manipulator arm frozen with a cable section gripped in its titanium fingers. stared at the display. The contact appeared as a diffuse blob, indistinct, but definitely there, moving in a slow arc roughly 800 meters out. Could have been anything. Thermal layer, dense particulate cloud, equipment echo bouncing off bottom topology. Except it was moving with purpose. Consistent speed, consistent distance, tracing what looked like a wide circuit around my position. I keyed the transmit button. Ocean Surveyor, Deepwater 1. Static hissed through the speaker. Then Catherine's voice came through clear and professional. Go ahead, Deepwater 1. I'm picking up something on sonar. Large contact, 800 meters out, circling pattern. Can you confirm what you're seeing on your end? Brief pause. I could picture her up there in the communications bay, fluorescent lights and climate control, checking her own displays, or maybe looking toward whoever was manning the vessel's primary sonar station. Stand by, Deepwater 1. I released the transmit button and returned my attention to the display. The contact completed its arc and disappeared off the edge of the screen's range. Waited. Counted heartbeats in the recycled air. 15 seconds. 20. It reappeared on the opposite side. Same distance. Same slow tracking speed. Deepwater 1. Ocean Surveyor. Catherine again. We consulted with Dakota on the sonar desk. He's reviewed the data and believes you're seeing thermal interference. We've got volcanic vents mapped throughout this region. Temperature gradients can create false returns, especially at depth. I'd worked around hydrothermal vents before. Knew how they could mess with instruments, create phantom readings, scatter sonar in unpredictable ways. Dakota probably had the geological surveys pulled up right now, cross-referencing known vent locations with my position. Made sense. Except it didn't feel right. Copy that, Ocean Surveyor. Continuing repairs. Acknowledged, Deepwater 1. I forced my focus back to the splice work. The severed cable ends floated in front of me, held steady by the manipulator arms, port arm gripping the northeastern section, starboard arm securing the southwestern. I'd already stripped back the outer armor on both ends, exposed the internal fiber bundles and power conductors. Precise work. Had to align everything perfectly, or the splice would fail within days. The starboard manipulator rotated fractionally, bringing the cable ends into alignment. I watched through the viewport and the external cameras simultaneously, triangulating position. My right hand worked the joystick control, my left hovering over the secondary functions. But my eyes kept flicking to the sonar display. The contact made another pass. Still 800 meters out, still following that wide, circular path. Thermal interference wouldn't maintain such a consistent pattern. Vents were stationary. Superheated water erupting from seafloor fissures, creating plumes that rose and dispersed. They didn't circle. I aligned the fiber bundles, cross-referenced the color codes to ensure proper pairing. 8 fiber pairs in TAT-14, each one carrying terabits of data across the Atlantic. Voices, transactions, streaming video, encrypted government communications. The entire invisible infrastructure of the modern world, condensed into strands of glass, thinner than human hair. My hands moved through the familiar sequence, secured the alignment sleeve, activated the fusion splicer mounted on the submersible's exterior work platform. The device would heat the fiber ends to melting point and fuse them together with microscopic precision, creating a joint as transparent and efficient as the original cable. The sonar contact passed again. Closer this time. I stopped, stared at the display, measured the distance with my eyes against the range markers. Not 800 meters anymore, more like 700, maybe 650. Could be drift. Ocean currents pushing whatever it was, thermal layer, particulate cloud, gradually toward my position. Happened all the time down here. Nothing moved in straight lines at depth. I returned to the splice. The fusion process took 3 minutes per fiber pair, fully automated once initiated. I triggered the first splice and watched the status indicator cycle through its sequence. Alignment verified, heating, fusion, cooling, strength test, green light. Started the second pair. The thing on the sonar passed again. 600 meters. My breathing got louder in the hull's confined space. I could hear the recycling system working, the faint hum of the life support processors, the occasional groan of the pressure sphere adjusting to thermal expansion. All normal sounds. All exactly what I should be hearing. I keyed the transmit again. Ocean Surveyor, Deepwater 1. Go ahead. That contact is still present and it's getting closer. Now showing approximately 600 meters, consistent circular track. Another pause. Longer this time. I imagined the conversation happening up there. Catherine conferring with Dakota, maybe Mickey standing behind them, arms crossed, impatient for me to finish the repairs and move to the next splice point. Deepwater 1. Dakota advises that thermal interference can appear to migrate due to current interaction. Recommend maintaining focus on primary task. You're doing good work down there. The reassurance felt forced. Professional protocol wrapped around dismissal. Understood. Continuing repairs. I didn't argue. What was I going to say? That my gut insisted something was wrong? That 30 years of deep-sea work had taught me to trust anomalies, to treat the ocean like the alien environment it was, hostile and strange and full of things we'd barely begun to catalog? They had their instruments up there. Sophisticated sonar arrays, thermal imaging, current modeling. Dakota was good at his job, knew how to read the data. And I was 4,000 meters down, alone in a metal sphere, staring at a green blob on a screen. I completed the second splice, started the third. The contact kept circling. 500 meters. 480. Each pass brought it incrementally closer, tightening the radius like a spiral slowly contracting toward center. I worked faster, got the third splice done, the fourth, the fifth. My hands moved through the procedures automatically. Strip, align, fuse, test. The manipulator arms responded to muscle memory more than conscious thought. I'd done this hundreds of times, in training pools and test facilities and real-world deployments across 3 oceans. But I'd never done it with something circling me in the dark. The 6th splice completed. 2 more to go on this breakpoint, then transit to the next section, then repeat the entire process 11 more times. Hours of work, hours down here with that thing, whatever it was, getting closer, 400 meters. The external cameras were running continuously, recording everything in their 180-degree field of view. I had 6 cameras mounted at different angles around the submersible's exterior, their feeds displayed on a bank of small monitors above the main viewport. Mostly they showed sediment and marine snow and the occasional translucent shrimp drifting past. Deep-sea fauna, adapted to the crushing pressure and eternal darkness. Nothing unusual. Nothing big. I started the 7th splice and let my eyes drift across the camera feeds while the fusion splicer did its work. Darkness and particulate. The floodlights created a sphere of visibility maybe 15, 20 feet out, and beyond that, nothing. Just black. The absolute absence of light that existed at depth where the sun's radiation couldn't penetrate, where the only illumination came from bioluminescent creatures generating their own cold glow. 300 meters. The cameras caught it first. Not on the main forward view, but on camera 4, the rear starboard angle, pointed back and down toward the submersible's stern. Just a flicker of movement at the very edge of the floodlight's range. There and gone so fast I almost thought I'd imagined it. I froze at the controls, stared at the monitor. The fusion splicer continued its automated sequence, status lights cycling through their programmed routine. The sonar painted its slow refresh, the contact now showing at 250 meters, still circling. The movement came again. Something pale passed through the edge of Camera 4's field of view, visible for maybe 2 seconds before disappearing back into darkness. Long and sinuous, gliding through the water with the fluid grace of something built for this environment. My mouth went dry. I switched the main display to Camera 4, expanded it to full screen. Watched the darkness beyond the lights. The marine snow drifted past, lazy and hypnotic. Seconds stretched. My heart hammered against my ribs, could feel it pounding, could hear it in my ears. Then it came back. Not at the edge this time. Closer, much closer. A pale serpentine shape glided directly through the floodlights, moving from right to left across the camera's view. Elongated body, smooth and streamlined, undulating with the motion of a creature that had never known the concept of resistance. Longer than any creature I'd ever seen documented. Longer than the submersible. Had to be at least 30 feet, maybe more. Difficult to judge scale in the featureless dark. The body tapered from a blunt head to a gradually narrowing tail, the whole length rippling with coordinated muscle contractions that propelled it forward without apparent effort. Then I saw the patterns. Bioluminescent markings ran along its flanks in rhythmic waves, pale blue-green light pulsing beneath translucent skin. Not random. Not the chaotic flashing of startled prey or the lure glow of an anglerfish. These pulses moved in organized sequence, traveling from head to tail in precise intervals. I couldn't breathe. The thing completed its pass across Camera 4 and vanished back into darkness. I sat motionless, hands locked on the controls, every nerve ending screaming at me to surface, to blow ballast, and ascend and get the hell away from whatever that was. But I didn't move. Couldn't move. The sonar showed the contact at 150 meters now, still circling, still maintaining that slow, deliberate track around my position. Not thermal interference, not equipment malfunction. Something alive and massive and moving with purpose. The fusion splicer beeped. 7th splice complete. I ignored it. My eyes tracked across all 6 camera feeds, searching the darkness beyond the lights. The thing had to be out there still, somewhere in that vast black void, continuing its circuit, watching me the same way I was trying to watch it. Camera 2 caught the next pass, port side this time, closer to the submersible. The pale, serpentine body glided past, those bioluminescent patterns pulsing along its length. I watched the rhythm, counted the intervals between pulses, approximately 1.3 seconds from initiation to completion of the wave sequence, the light traveling from anterior to posterior, in smooth progression. Something about that rhythm triggered recognition in my brain. Familiar. I'd seen that pattern before, or something close to it. The creature completed its pass and disappeared. I pulled my eyes away from the cameras and looked at the cable splice in front of me. The TAT-14 fiber optic line, repaired and functional. Data signals ready to flow through the fused connections the moment the entire section was restored. Electromagnetic pulses traveling at light speed through glass, carrying information encoded in precise intervals. Oh, Christ. The frequency matched. I stared at the cable, then back at the camera feeds, then at my instruments. The TAT-14 specifications were burned into my memory from years of maintenance work. Signal modulation frequency of 1.2 to 1.4 gigahertz depending on traffic load, wavelength division multiplexing across 8 channels, total bandwidth capacity of... The bioluminescent pulses were matching the cable's electromagnetic frequency. Not exactly. This thing wasn't operating at gigahertz speeds, wasn't matching the individual data packets, but the broader rhythm, the overall pattern of signal flow through an active communications line, the macro-level pulse that would create a detectable electromagnetic field around the cable itself. The creature was mirroring it. I looked at the 12 clean cuts I'd documented, spread across 3 miles of seafloor, precise surgical incisions through armored cable. No stress fracturing, no environmental damage, just clean separations that would completely interrupt signal flow while leaving the physical cable sections intact enough to feed on. My hands started shaking. This thing had been following the cable, not randomly damaging it, not accidentally interfering with it, deliberately cutting it at intervals, creating breaks in the signal flow, maybe concentrating the electromagnetic discharge at the severed ends. Following communication lines across entire ocean basins, the way a predator tracked prey, sensing the electrical signals the same way sharks sensed bioelectric fields. The cable network spanned the entire Atlantic. Thousands of miles of fiber optic lines, all of them carrying massive data loads, all of them generating detectable electromagnetic signatures. An infinite buffet spread across the seafloor, pulsing with energy in patterns that must look like, what? Food sources? Mating calls? Territory markers? I didn't know. Couldn't know. But I understood what had caused the damage now. Understood why the cuts were so clean, so precise. This thing had tools, teeth, specialized mouth structures, something evolved or adapted specifically for this purpose, for cutting through armored cable and accessing whatever it wanted from the electromagnetic signals inside. The creature came back. Camera 3 this time, starboard side, even closer than before, maybe 50 feet out, well within the floodlight's effective range. I got my first clear look at its head, blunt and streamlined, no visible eyes. What might have been sensory pits or electroreceptors dotting the anterior surface. The mouth was closed, but I could see the outline of it, a ventral opening that probably extended back along the first several feet of body length, big enough to engulf the cable, big enough to bite through it. The bioluminescent patterns pulsed again, that same 1.3-second rhythm, and I watched the light travel along its flanks in waves of pale blue-green. Beautiful, in a terrible sort of way. Adapted to an environment humans could barely survive in. Evolved for conditions we needed metal spheres and life support systems to endure. It owned this world. I was just visiting. The thing glided past, 30 feet of pale serpentine body undulating through the water, and kept going, continued its circle. The sonar showed it at 100 meters now, the spiral tightening, bringing it closer with each pass. I should have surfaced right then. Should have abandoned the repair, blown ballast, made for the surface, and told Mickey and Catherine and Dakota and anyone else who'd listen that we had a serious problem down here. That the cable network had attracted something we didn't understand, something that could damage critical infrastructure, something that made thermal vents and equipment glitches look like comforting explanations. But I didn't. I sat there in my metal sphere, 4,000 meters down, and watched the cameras. Watched this impossible creature circle through the darkness, its body pulsing with light, its movements precise and purposeful. And I understood with absolute clarity that no one was going to believe me. I keyed the transmit switch. Ocean Surveyor, Deepwater 1. I have visual contact with an unidentified biological entity. Estimated length 40 to 50 meters. Repeating, unidentified biological contact. My voice came out steady. Professional. The way it always did when systems were failing or pressure gauges were climbing into red zones. Training took over when your brain wanted to shut down. But my hands were shaking against the control panel. Fingers white where they gripped the edge of the console. Catherine's response came through after the usual delay. Deepwater 1. Stand by for Director Fox. Mickey's voice cut through the comm, clipped and irritated. Wong, I'm looking at your camera feed. The footage is inconclusive. Poor visibility, extreme depth, significant particulate interference. Director, the contact was clear. I observed. What you observed was likely a whale, blue whale, possibly sperm whale at depth. They reach those dimensions. I swallowed. My mouth had gone dry. Sir, the morphology wasn't consistent with known cetacean profiles. The movement pattern. Continue repairs, Wong. We're losing $200,000 per hour on this dropout. Every minute you're sightseeing costs the company money. The creature appeared again at the edge of my light range. Just a shadow at first, then that same elongated form sliding through the water. Smooth, deliberate, closer than before. Director, I'm recommending immediate abort and ascent. The contact is exhibiting approach behavior. Your recommendation is noted and denied. You have 11 splice points remaining. Get to work. The comm clicked off. I sat there, hands still gripping the console. My heart was doing something irregular against my ribs. Approach behavior. That's what I'd said, clinical. Like I was documenting fish schooling patterns in a reef survey instead of watching something the size of a subway train circle my position at the bottom of the Atlantic. The manipulator arms were still extended. I'd been positioning the second cable segment when I first saw it. The arc welder was powered up, ready for the splice connection. Yellow caution indicator glowing on the electrical systems panel. The creature made another pass. Definitely closer. I could see more detail now through the viewport. The way its body undulated, sections moving in sequence. Not the up-down motion of a whale's tail. Something else. Lateral flexion, almost serpentine. My brain was trying to catalog it, identify it, fit it into some taxonomy I understood. But there wasn't anything in my experience that matched what I was seeing. It circled again. The pattern was tightening. Each pass brought it closer to the submersible, closer to the cable section I'd been working on. Closer to... The realization hit me cold. The lights. I had every external flood at maximum output. 20,000 lumens punching through the darkness, making a sphere of visibility maybe 15 meters across. And the welder, the arc welder, was powered up, electrical systems active, ready to pump current through the splice connection. I was broadcasting. Every system, every light, every active electrical component was sending signals through the water. Electromagnetic radiation, heat signatures. The whole submersible was lit up down here, bright as a highway billboard in the middle of nowhere. I'd been running a beacon. 4,000 meters down where sunlight hadn't penetrated in the entire history of the ocean, where most organisms were blind or had light-producing organs of their own, where the only energy sources were geothermal vents and the occasional bioluminescent hunter. I'd been flooding the area with light and electricity. Ringing the dinner bell. Christ. I was an idiot. The creature came around again, close enough now that I could see its full profile in the floods. That elongated body, those appendages or fins or whatever they were along its length. The way it moved with absolute precision through the water, adjusting its position, maintaining a steady circular path that was contracting with each revolution. My hand moved toward the power management panel. I could shut down the welder, reduce the floods to minimum, cut the electromagnetic signature, and maybe... The impact came from starboard. No warning. No change in the creature's pattern. 1 second I was watching it pass ahead of the viewport, and the next second, the whole submersible lurched sideways, metal shrieking, and I went head first into the instrument panel. My forehead cracked against something hard. The depth gauge, maybe. Stars exploded across my vision. I bounced back, shoulder slamming into the pilot's seat restraint I hadn't bothered to fasten because I'd just been doing a quick splice, just a few minutes of work. Didn't need the full safety protocol. The warning lights came on all at once, red across every system panel. Hull integrity alert. Ballast system compromised. External camera 3 offline. Starboard manipulator arm showing structural damage. Hydraulic pressure dropping in the aft control surface. Battery compartment temperature rising. The submersible was screaming at me in every language it had. I grabbed the pilot's seat, pulled myself upright. Blood was running down from somewhere above my left eye. I wiped it away with my sleeve. The instrument panel swam in and out of focus, doubled, then resolved. Hull integrity was the critical one. The red indicator was flashing, but the pressure reading inside the sphere hadn't changed. No breach. Not yet. Whatever had hit us hadn't punched through the titanium shell, but the external damage was extensive. I could hear something grinding in the starboard side. Metal on metal. One of the manipulator arms, probably, bent at an angle and scraping against the hull mounting. My hand found the power management panel. The main breaker switch sat under a clear protective cover. Emergency shutdown protocol. Kill everything except life support reserves and ascent capability. I'd never used it. Not in 14 years of deep-sea work. You didn't shut down a submersible at depth unless you were about to die. The hull groaned. Something massive moved past the viewport, blocking out the view of open water. Just a wall of dark flesh sliding by, close enough that I could see the texture of it. 10 hours. That's what the emergency reserves would give me. 10 hours of recycled air and minimal heat, and no lights, no cameras, no sonar, no propulsion beyond the ballast blow for emergency ascent. 10 hours sitting blind at the bottom of the Atlantic, waiting for a rescue that would take, what? 12 hours minimum to get another submersible deployed and down here? Longer if they had to pull one from another site? Mickey would order me to continue repairs. He'd say the collision was incidental contact, that the creature was just investigating and I'd overreacted. He'd remind me about the 200,000 per hour and the 11 remaining splice points and the career consequences of abandoning company equipment on the seafloor. I could hear his voice already. The creature circled back. I saw it through the viewport, coming around for another pass. Its movement had changed. More direct now. Less exploratory. My fingers flipped up the protective cover on the main breaker. I pulled the switch. The lights died instantly. External floods, internal instrument lighting, the monitor displays, everything went black. The sonar's steady ping cut off mid-cycle. The ventilation fans spun down. Even the low hum of the main electrical bus disappeared. The only sound left was my breathing, and the emergency life support system, running on its isolated battery bank. A faint whir somewhere behind the pilot's seat. Oxygen scrubbers cycling. Heating elements maintaining minimal temperature. 10 hours of power. Maybe 12 if I didn't move much, if I kept my metabolic rate down, if I didn't panic and start burning through oxygen. I sat in the darkness. Absolute. Complete. The kind of dark that didn't exist on the surface anymore, not with city lights and phones and stars. The dark of deep caves and closed coffins. The dark of the abyss. I listened. The scraping started maybe 30 seconds after I killed the lights. Could have been less. Hard to track time when your heart's hammering that hard. Something massive dragged across the hull above me. Metal groaned. Not the pressure groan I'd been hearing all descent, but a different sound entirely. Higher pitched. The kind of protest metal makes when something's testing it. I froze in the pilot seat. Didn't even breathe for those first few seconds. The scraping moved from overhead toward the starboard side. slow, deliberate. Whatever was out there wasn't just brushing against the hull by accident. It was exploring, running along the surface with enough pressure that I could hear every inch of contact through 7 centimeters of titanium alloy. Every sound amplified in that silence. My breathing, too loud, too fast, filled the sphere. The recycling system was off, but I could hear the residual hiss in the airlines. My pulse thudded in my ears. The fabric of my compression layer whispered when I shifted my weight. And underneath it all, that scraping, continuous now, circling. I forced myself to breathe slower. Counted to 4 on the inhale, held it, counted to 4 on the exhale. My hands were locked on the armrests hard enough that my knuckles ached. The thing moved along the starboard curve toward the aft section. I tracked it by sound alone. The scraping had texture to it, not smooth, not constant. Whatever was making contact had irregular surfaces, ridges maybe, or scales. Christ, I didn't want to think about what had scales that size. It reached the aft equipment housing and paused. The silence that followed was worse than the noise. I sat there in the dark, every muscle rigid, waiting for whatever came next. My eyes strained toward where I knew the aft bulkhead was. Couldn't see a damn thing, but I stared anyway. Something impacted the hull. Sharp, precise, like a test tap. Then another. Different location. Starboard side again, closer to amidships. The thing was mapping me, working its way around the sphere, checking the structure, looking for weak points. The taps came at irregular intervals, 3 in quick succession, then nothing for 15 seconds, then 2 more. Each one sent a jolt through my chest. I kept my hands on the armrests. Didn't move. Didn't reach for any controls. The submersible was a tomb right now, but it was a solid tomb, rated for 6,000 meters. The hull could take the pressure down here, could take a hell of a lot more than the pressure. Question was what else it could take. The tapping stopped. The scraping resumed, moving forward now along the port side. Slower this time, more methodical. I turned my head fractionally to track the sound, moving nothing but my neck. It reached the forward section, passed over the main viewport. Then came the worst moment. A faint glow appeared at the porthole. Pale green, dim enough that at first I thought I was imagining it. My oxygen-starved brain conjuring phantom lights. But it strengthened, spread, cast the faintest illumination across the dark interior of the sphere. I found myself staring at an eye the size of a dinner plate. My breath stopped. Didn't make the decision to hold it. My lungs just locked up. The eye was maybe 20 centimeters from the viewport glass, huge, reflective. The pupil was a vertical slit, black against pale yellow-green iris. Ancient was the word that came to me. Don't know why. Something about the way it looked at me. Patient, knowing, intelligent. The bioluminescent patterns pulsed across whatever body was attached to that eye. I couldn't see the full shape. The glow only revealed suggestions of mass, dark outlines that shifted against darker water. But the patterns were clear, deliberate. Photophores arranged in lines and clusters, firing in sequence. Blue-green light rippling across skin or scales, or Christ knew what. The eye didn't blink, didn't move, just studied me through 7 inches of acrylic polymer. I understood 2 things in that moment, sitting frozen in my seat with my heart trying to punch through my ribs. First, the thing could see me. Somehow in this absolute darkness, with all my systems dead and no light escaping the hull, it knew exactly where I was. Maybe it sensed the heat signature. Maybe it had other ways of seeing that didn't need light, didn't matter. It knew. Second, it was waiting for me to make a mistake, not attacking, not trying to breach the hull, just watching. The bioluminescent pulses were steady, almost hypnotic. The eye tracked microscopically as I breathed, following the tiny movement of my chest. Predatory patience. That's what it was. The kind of patience that comes from being apex in an environment where prey is scarce and energy is precious. Nothing down here wasted effort on unnecessary action. The thing would wait until I did something stupid. Powered up the systems, tried to move, gave it a reason to strike. My hands started trembling on the armrests. Adrenaline with nowhere to go. I kept my breathing shallow, kept my body as still as I could manage. But I couldn't stop the fine tremor that ran through my arms. The eye shifted fractionally, focusing on my hands. It saw that too. The bioluminescent patterns pulsed faster. Still rhythmic, still controlled, but the tempo increased. The green glow strengthened. I stopped breathing again, forced every muscle to lock down. The tremor faded after maybe 10 seconds, longest 10 seconds I'd lived through. The patterns slowed, returned to their original tempo. Jesus Christ. It was reading me, responding to my movements, my stress indicators, testing to see what provoked reaction. I couldn't keep playing this game. Couldn't sit here trying to outweight something that had evolved for exactly this kind of ambush patience. My air was limited, maybe 6 hours on what was left in the recycling system. Less if I couldn't control my breathing. The cold was already seeping through my compression layers. The sphere's internal temperature would drop steadily without power to the heating elements. The thing outside had all the time in the world. I had maybe half a day before hypothermia or oxygen depletion made the decision for me. The eye finally moved, drew back from the viewport. The green glow faded, and for a moment I thought it was leaving. Then the scraping resumed, overhead again, circling. It was establishing a pattern, a patrol route around its trapped prey. My hands had gone numb on the armrests. I couldn't tell if it was the cold or the pressure of my grip cutting off circulation. Didn't dare move to check. Time stopped meaning anything. The circuits continued. Sometimes the eye appeared at the viewport. Sometimes the scraping paused, and I'd sit there in silence, waiting, wondering if this was when it would strike, or when it would finally lose interest and drift away into the dark. Neither happened. The cold crept deeper. My core temperature was dropping. I could feel it in the way my thoughts started to slow, the way my fingers and toes went from numb to completely absent. The compression layer was designed for climate-controlled submersibles, not unpowered tombs at 4,000 meters. Hypothermia would hit in stages. I was maybe an hour in, already past the shivering stage and into the dangerous, quiet cold. My metabolism was slowing, heart rate dropping. In another hour, maybe 2, I'd start making mistakes. Judgment would go, fine motor control, eventually consciousness. If rescue was coming, they'd need to find me before then. If the thing outside didn't find a way through the hull first. Another circuit, the scraping overhead. I'd stopped tracking individual passes, lost count somewhere around 20. Could have been 30. Could have been more. My breathing had steadied out of necessity. Couldn't afford to hyperventilate. Couldn't afford to burn through oxygen any faster than baseline. Every breath was measured, controlled, automatic. The eye appeared again at the viewport. Watched. Withdrew. I wondered if Ocean Surveyor had even noticed I'd gone dark. Wondered if Catherine was trying to raise me on comms. If Mickey had authorized a rescue submersible yet. If anyone was coming. Wondered if I'd live long enough to find out. The scraping continued. The darkness pressed in. The cold settled into my bones, and I waited. 8 hours. I know that's how long it was because when they pulled me out, Rain told me. 8 hours in complete darkness at 4,000 meters, with that thing circling my tomb. But in the moment, I had no way to track it. No instruments, no displays, no light. Just the cold and the dark and the sound of my own breathing getting shallower with each cycle. I stayed perfectly still, didn't move my hands, didn't shift my weight, didn't do anything except pull tiny sips of air through my nose and hold them as long as my lungs could stand. The CO2 scrubbers were offline with everything else. No power meant no life support cycling. Every breath I took added carbon dioxide to the sphere's atmosphere, and every breath I didn't take bought me a few more minutes before the air turned toxic. The math ran itself in the back of my head. Couldn't stop it. 7 cubic meters of interior space, roughly 21% oxygen content at launch, metabolic consumption rate of 0.25 liters per minute at rest in cold conditions. Figure the CO2 buildup would incapacitate me before the O2 depletion killed me outright. Maybe 16 hours of air if I stayed completely still. Maybe 12 if I panicked. I didn't panic. Couldn't afford to. The scraping came and went in irregular intervals. Sometimes I'd hear it drag along the starboard side, metal on metal with that awful resonance that made my teeth ache. Other times it'd go silent for what felt like an hour, and I'd start to think maybe it had moved on. Maybe I could risk bringing systems back online. Then I'd hear it again, closer, circling. The thing was hunting. I knew that much. It had destroyed the cable, 12 precise cuts over 3 miles, and my submersible's electrical signature had drawn it in. Electromagnetic prey in a lightless world where most living things generated bioelectric fields too faint to bother with. I'd been broadcasting my presence in 10,000 watts of external lighting and active sonar pings. Stupid. Should have known better. Should have shut down the moment I saw those cuts. The cold crept in slowly, then all at once. First my fingers went numb, then my toes. The compression layers I wore were designed for the pressure-controlled interior, not for prolonged exposure to near-freezing temperatures. The hull conducted the abyssal cold straight through to the air inside. My breath started fogging even though I couldn't see it in the darkness. I tucked my hands under my armpits, pulled my knees up to my chest, tried to make myself as small as possible, conserve whatever body heat I had left. The shivering started maybe 3 hours in. Involuntary muscle contractions, trying to generate warmth. I clenched my jaw to keep my teeth from chattering. Didn't want to make noise, didn't want to give that thing any reason to come back. But my body had its own priorities. Survival first, stealth second. I drifted. Not sleep exactly. More a kind of shutdown where my brain stopped processing in linear time. I'd surface back to awareness and have no idea if seconds or hours had passed. The darkness was absolute. No reference points. No way to orient myself, except the gentle pressure of the pilot seat against my back and the deck under my feet. At some point, the scraping stopped. I noticed its absence before I consciously registered what had changed. The background tension in my shoulders eased slightly. My breathing, shallow and controlled, stayed steady, but the spike of adrenaline that came with each metallic rasp faded into just the baseline fear. It had moved on. Maybe it found another electromagnetic source somewhere in the abyss. Maybe it just got bored waiting for me to do something interesting. Maybe it was patient enough to know I'd either restore power eventually or die in the dark, and either option would resolve itself without further attention. I stayed in the darkness anyway. Didn't trust it. Didn't trust that the thing wasn't lurking just beyond the hull, waiting for me to make a mistake. Didn't trust my own judgment anymore. I'd already made enough mistakes to end up here. The cold went deeper, past the shivering stage into something worse. My thoughts got slower, thicker. I'd start a mental calculation and lose track halfway through. Forget what I was trying to figure out. Surface back to awareness and realize I'd been staring at nothing for an unknown stretch of time. Hypothermia, core temperature dropping below operational minimums. I knew the signs, knew what was happening to me. Couldn't do a damn thing about it. My air was running out too. I could feel it in the quality of each breath, the oxygen getting thinner, the CO2 buildup making my head ache and my thoughts fuzz at the edges. I tried to count breaths, tried to estimate how much time I had left, but the numbers wouldn't stick in my head. Didn't matter anymore. Either rescue would come or it wouldn't. Either I'd last long enough or I wouldn't. The situation had moved beyond my control somewhere in the third or fourth hour, and now I was just waiting to see which gave out first, the air or my body temperature. I thought about Porto, the cafe by the Douro River where I'd been sitting when Mickey called. Warm sunlight on my face, espresso bitter and perfect, pigeons pecking at crumbs near my feet. 48 hours ago. Different world. Should have stayed there. Should have let the call go to voicemail. My head dropped forward. Couldn't hold it up anymore. The muscles in my neck had gone loose and unresponsive. I heard something. Distant, muffled through the hull and the water and the thickness in my head. A sound that didn't belong to the abyss. Mechanical. Regular. Purposeful. Sonar pings. Active sonar in a search pattern, sweeping through the water column. I tried to move, tried to reach for the control panel, bring systems online, broadcast a signal. My hands wouldn't cooperate. Fingers numb and clumsy, arms heavy as lead. The pings got closer. I managed to lift one hand, found the edge of the control panel by touch in the darkness, traced along the surface looking for the main power switch. Couldn't risk it. What if the thing was still out there? What if it heard? The sonar swept past again. Closer. Definitely a search pattern. Rescue or death. Those were the options. Stay dark and freeze to death breathing poison air, or light up and hope whoever was out there found me before the creature did. I found the switch, flipped it. Nothing happened. I tried again, hands shaking so hard I could barely grip it. Flipped it 3 times. 4 times. Dead. The batteries had dump discharged when I cut primary power. Safety protocol to prevent electrical fires. Should have isolated them first. Should have thought it through. Didn't matter. Couldn't fix it now. The sonar pings moved past my position, sweeping further south. I tried to bang on the hull, make noise, draw attention. My fist hit the metal with a dull thud that barely registered. No strength left, no way to signal. The pings faded into the distance. I slumped back in the seat. Done. That was it. I'd lost my chance. My eyes closed. Didn't make a difference in the darkness, but my body was shutting down system by system, and apparently eyelid control wasn't priority anymore. The sound came back. Different this time. Not sonar pings, but something else. A mechanical hum, propulsion systems getting louder, coming straight toward my position. I felt the vibration through the hull before I heard the impact. Metal on metal, deliberate and controlled. Something docking with my submersible. Voices, muffled but unmistakably human, shouting instructions to each other. The emergency hatch access rattled. Someone working the external override. I tried to call out. Managed a sound somewhere between a whisper and a croak. The hatch unsealed with a hiss of equalizing pressure. Light flooded in, blinding after 8 hours of absolute darkness. I squeezed my eyes shut against it. Hands grabbed me. Multiple people moving fast, professional. Got him. He's alive. Barely. Core temp's gonna be in the basement. Get a blanket on him now. Watch his head. Easy. We don't know what condition. They lifted me out of the seat. My legs buckled immediately. No strength. No coordination. Someone caught me before I hit the deck. I've got you. Stay with me. We're getting you out. A woman's voice, calm, authoritative, military bearing even in crisis. I opened my eyes enough to see her face. Sharp features, gray-blue eyes, sandy blonde hair pulled back. Lieutenant Commander rank insignia on her rescue suit. Rain Warner. I learned her name later. In that moment, she was just the person pulling me out of my tomb. They wrapped me in thermal blankets, moved me through the docking collar into their rescue sub. Hands everywhere, checking pulse, respiration, pupil response. Someone put an oxygen mask over my face. The air tasted sweet and cold and perfect. Hypothermic, severe. Get him to the surface now. The rescue sub's engines kicked in. I felt the ascent in my gut, that familiar pressure change as we rose through the water column. Rain stayed next to me, kept one hand on my shoulder, steady pressure, anchoring me. You're gonna be fine. We're 30 minutes from the surface. Stay awake if you can. I tried to nod, manage something that might have looked like agreement. The ascent took forever and no time at all. I drifted in and out, awareness flickering. The oxygen helped, but my core temperature was still dropping. Takes hours to rewarm safely. Can't do it too fast or the cold blood from your extremities floods back to your heart and stops it dead. They knew what they were doing. Controlled rewarming, careful monitoring. Rain talked to me the whole time. Asked questions. My name. Where I was from. What I remembered. Keeping me conscious, keeping me focused. I answered when I could. Caden Wong. Porto, most recently. Everything. I remembered everything. That last part came out more bitter than I intended. Rain didn't push, just nodded and kept her hand on my shoulder. We broke the surface 32 minutes after they pulled me from the submersible. I felt the transition, the change in motion as we moved from water to air, the different quality of sound, waves against the hull instead of the absolute silence of the deep. They transferred me to the support vessel, Navy rescue ship, not ocean surveyor. Different crew, different protocols. Medical team waiting on deck with a gurney and warming equipment. The sky was overcast, gray light, weak and thin, but after 8 hours of darkness it looked like the surface of the sun. I was alive. Changed, Rain said later. She was right about that. You don't see what I saw in the abyss and come back the same person. But alive. For whatever that was worth. The report came through 3 days after they pulled me up. I was still on the ocean surveyor, still running through medical checks every 6 hours, still feeling the pressure differential in my joints every time I moved. Catherine brought it to my quarters herself, printed on actual paper, which told me everything I needed to know about how official this was. Equipment malfunction. That's what Mickey's report said. Hydraulic failure in the starboard manipulator arm caused structural stress that compromised hull integrity at depth. The damage to cable TAT-14 resulted from anchor drag during a storm 2 weeks prior. Never mind that the weather data showed calm seas. Never mind that anchor chains don't make surgical cuts through armored cable. My near-death experience, the report concluded, stemmed from operator error compounded by system failure. Not one word about what I'd seen down there. Catherine set the report on my bunk and wouldn't meet my eyes. Director Fox needs your signature on the acknowledgement page. I flipped through it. 12 pages of technical language and corporate liability protection. The footage I'd transmitted, those 47 seconds of that thing moving past my viewport, the bioluminescent patterns rippling along its length, that massive eye fixing on me with unmistakable intelligence, didn't exist anywhere in the document. The audio log of my transmissions had been edited, my description of the creature cut out entirely, replaced with garbled static, attributed to communication system degradation under pressure. "Catherine." I looked up at her. "You heard what I said down there. You logged the transmission." She picked at her thumbnail. Wouldn't look at me. The recording was corrupted. Pressure does that sometimes to the relay systems. Bullshit. That's what the technical analysis determined. Her voice stayed flat, professional. She'd practiced this. "Sign the acknowledgement, Caden. Director Fox is waiting." I signed it. What else was I going to do? The evidence disappeared in stages. First the video footage. Catherine told me the file had corrupted during transmission, that only the first 8 seconds were recoverable, and those showed nothing but sediment and marine snow. Then the whole camera recordings vanished from the backup servers. "System glitch during my emergency ascent," they said. Data loss occurred when they had to reboot the navigation computer to plot my rescue. I'd transmitted that footage on a hardline connection, specifically designed to prevent corruption. Triple redundant storage, error correction protocols built into every layer of the system. I'd worked with this equipment for 15 years. I knew what it could and couldn't do. But the files were gone. Dakota from Sonar stopped talking to me after the second day. He'd been the one monitoring the acoustic data during my dive, the one who would have recorded the sounds I'd transmitted, the low-frequency pulses that thing made, the resonance I'd felt through the hull plating. When I caught him in the galley and asked about the sonar logs, he looked at me the way you'd look at someone who'd lost their grip. "There was nothing on sonar," he said. "Just you and the seafloor. Dakota, you heard. I heard hull stress and your breathing getting ragged." He dumped his coffee in the sink. "You had a rough dive, man. Pressure does things to people. You're lucky you made it up." He left before I could argue. Rain Warner came by that evening. She sat across from me in the observation lounge and kept her voice low. I saw the preliminary footage before it was flagged for technical review. She watched the door. 47 seconds. "I know what you sent up." Something in my chest loosened. "Then you know." "I know the file was classified and removed from standard servers within 2 hours of transmission." Rain leaned forward. "I know Director Fox personally oversaw the technical analysis. I know 3 different data specialists signed off on corruption findings, and I know all 3 of them received performance bonuses last month. So what do I do?" She stood up. "You do nothing. You take your medical leave. You file your post-incident evaluation. And you don't mention what you think you saw at depth." Her eyes met mine. "Because what you saw isn't in any official record, and people who insist on remembering things that aren't in official records don't stay employed very long." She left me sitting there watching the Atlantic roll past the observation windows. Mickey called me to his quarters on the 4th day. I'd been cleared for light duty by then, though the company doctor recommended another week of observation before I returned to regular rotation. Mickey's temporary office aboard the Ocean Surveyor took up half the executive level, wood paneling that cost more than my annual salary, actual windows instead of portholes, furniture that didn't bolt to the deck. He didn't get up when I came in, just gestured at the chair across from his desk. "Caden, how are you feeling?" "Fine, sir." Good, good." He shuffled some papers. The report I'd signed sat on top of the stack. "Hell of an experience you had down there. We're very grateful you made it back safely. I didn't say anything. Mickey took off his glasses and cleaned them with a cloth from his desk drawer. Without them, his eyes looked smaller, paler. You've been with Transatlantic Telecommunications for what, 14 years? 15 in January. 15 years. Excellent safety record. Best splice technician in the Atlantic Division. He put his glasses back on. The company values that kind of experience, Caden. Values it highly. The air conditioning hummed. Outside the windows, gray sky met gray water. This incident, Mickey continued, equipment malfunction, system stress, pressure-related complications, these things happen in deep-sea operations. No one's questioning your competence. No one's suggesting you did anything wrong. Just that I saw things that weren't there. His expression didn't change. Pressure affects people differently. Nitrogen narcosis, oxygen toxicity, sensory deprivation, all documented phenomena at depth. The medical team found trace elevated CO2 in your system when you surfaced. That alone can cause vivid hallucinations. The footage was corrupted during transmission. You read the technical analysis. He leaned forward. Caden, I'm going to be direct with you. Your career with this company has been exemplary. You're looking at senior technical specialist promotion within 2 years, possibly a training coordinator position after that. Pension vests at 20 years. You've got a solid future here. He let that sit between us. But that future depends on reliability, Mickey said. On being someone the company can trust to represent our interests professionally. Someone who understands that operational incidents get documented according to evidence-based technical analysis, not personal interpretation shaped by extreme physiological stress. My hands were flat on my thighs. I could feel the scar on my left temple starting to itch, the way it did when my blood pressure spiked. I need to know you understand that, Mickey said. I understood perfectly. Keep my mouth shut about what I'd seen or lose everything I'd spent 15 years building. No recommendation letters for another company. No references. Probably a medical evaluation declaring me unfit for deep-sea operations due to pressure-induced psychological instability. I understand, sir. Good. He smiled, friendly now, avuncular. Take your medical leave. Get some rest. When you come back, we'll have you on light duty for a month or so. Let you ease back into things. No deep dives until you're ready. Yes, sir. I stood up, made it almost to the door before he spoke again. Caden, the company takes care of people who take care of the company. Remember that. I remembered, but I also remembered that lying in my bunk that night, feeling the ocean surveyor roll beneath me, I kept seeing it. The size of it had to be 3 feet across at least, maybe 4. The pupil contracting as my lights hit it, the iris shifting through colors I didn't have names for. The way it had tracked my movement, following me with precise deliberation as I'd tried to maneuver away. That wasn't an animal reacting on instinct. That was something thinking, calculating, studying me the same way I'd been studying the severed cable. The patience of it stuck with me worst. It hadn't attacked when I'd first arrived, hadn't shown itself while I was working. It had waited until I was committed, until I was vulnerable and focused on the splice work. And then it had moved in. Slow, methodical. Testing my lights, my hull, my reactions. Hunting behavior. And those cuts in the cable. 12 precise severing points spaced over 3 miles. I'd worked enough failure analysis to know what equipment malfunction looked like, what environmental damage did to armored cable. This was neither. The cuts were too clean, too regular, too deliberate. Something had done that on purpose, something that had stayed in the area afterward, waiting. Maybe feeding on the electromagnetic signals that pulsed through the cable before it got cut. Maybe drawn to them the way sharks got drawn to electrical fields. I pulled out my personal tablet and started searching. Took me 2 hours to find the pattern, cross-referencing company incident reports that weren't classified above my clearance level. 7 major cable failures in the North Atlantic over the past 18 months. 4 in the Pacific, 2 in the Indian Ocean. All deep water installations, all involving multiple breakpoints. All attributed to equipment failure or environmental factors, none mentioning anything alive. The company had restored service on everyone, sent down technicians, made the repairs, filed the reports. Standard operational procedure. But reading between the lines of the technical documentation, I could see it. Response times getting faster, repair protocols getting more streamlined. Like they'd done this enough times to get efficient at it. Like they knew what was really happening and had decided the cost of acknowledging it was higher than the cost of just fixing the damage and moving on. I shut down the tablet, lay there in the dark listening to the hull creaking and the ocean moving outside. Something was hunting in the deep ocean. Something big enough to sever armored cable like it was cutting through kelp. Something intelligent enough to be selective about it, to target the electromagnetic signals that carried data between continents, that connected the world's communication networks. And I'd survived an encounter with it only because it had decided to let me go. Maybe it had been satisfied with driving me away. Maybe it had already fed enough on the signals from the damaged cable. Maybe it just hadn't been hungry. Or maybe it had looked at me through that viewport and decided I wasn't worth the effort. Just another small thing in a metal shell, temporary and irrelevant. No threat to whatever it was doing down there in the dark. I didn't know which possibility scared me more. What I did know, what I understood with absolute certainty, was that no one was going to acknowledge it. Not Mickey, not the company, not whatever government agencies had clearance to see the classified data. They'd keep sending down technicians to make repairs, keep attributing the damage to equipment failure and environmental factors, keep burying the evidence and silencing anyone who saw too much. Because admitting the truth meant admitting they didn't control the infrastructure that ran the modern world, meant admitting something else had claim to it, something that lived in places humans could barely reach and only temporarily survive, meant admitting we were building our connected civilization on sufferance from things we didn't understand and couldn't stop. I'd barely survived the encounter, burned through my battery reserves, damaged my hull integrity, surfaced with my hands shaking and my heart rate at 140. If that thing had decided to press its investigation, if it had pushed against my viewport with real force or wrapped itself around my hull, I'd still be down there. 4,000 meters deep, entombed in a metal sphere, slowly suffocating as my oxygen ran out. But I had survived. And I knew the truth, even if I could never speak it. Something was down there. Something old and patient and hungry for the signals we pumped through cables on the ocean floor. And I'd looked it in the eye. The company put me back on regular rotation after a week of medical observation. Clean bill of health, they said, fit for duty. I started checking the industry reports the day I got clearance. At first, I told myself it was professional curiosity, standard practice, really. Any experienced tech keeps tabs on major infrastructure events, learns from other crews' problems, stays current on failure patterns. I'd been doing it for 15 years. Nothing unusual about pulling up the global telecommunications incident database over morning coffee, scanning through the overnight alerts from cable operators worldwide. Except I wasn't looking for professional development anymore. I was looking for proof I wasn't crazy. The first incident showed up 4 days after my dive, South Atlantic, roughly 800 nautical miles southwest of Cape Town, C-Connect reported complete signal loss on their SAT-3 cable, 12-mile affected section, multiple breakpoints. Their initial survey noted unusual damage characteristics inconsistent with standard failure modes. My hands went cold reading that line. I clicked through to the technical appendix. The survey tech had documented 7 separate cuts, clean cross-sections, no environmental stress indicators. Spacing varied between 400 and 600 meters. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, coffee going cold in my hand. Could be coincidence. Different ocean, different cable, different operator. Clean cuts weren't impossible. Anchor strikes sometimes produced them, industrial salvage equipment, even certain types of seismic fractures under the right conditions. But 7 cuts over 12 miles. I bookmarked the report and told myself to let it go. 3 days later, Mediterranean Sea, 40 nautical miles north of Alexandria, Eurolink cable showing catastrophic failure across a 9-mile section. Preliminary survey documented multiple precise severance points. Pattern suggests deliberate spacing. My chest tightened. I pulled up both reports side by side, compared the technical specifications. Different manufacturers, different armor configurations, different deployment depths. SAT-3 ran at 3,800 meters. Eurolink's affected section sat at 2,900. But the damage patterns matched. Clean cuts, multiple breaks, deliberate spacing. I started a spreadsheet that night. Date, location, cable designation, depth, number of breaks, spacing intervals. 2 incidents didn't make a pattern, but I needed to see it laid out. Needed the data organized where I could track it properly. The 3rd incident hit 6 days after Alexandria. Pacific Ocean, northeast of Guam. Trans-Pacific Cable TP9, 14-mile affected section, 3,200 meters depth. 9 documented breaks. I added it to the spreadsheet with hands that wanted to shake. The weeks that followed turned into a kind of waking nightmare. I'd get up, make coffee, open my laptop before I'd even finished the first cup, check the industry alerts, scan the operator bulletins, pull up the incident database. Most mornings brought nothing. Standard outages, equipment failures, routine maintenance notices. But every 3 days, every 5 days, every week at most, another major disruption would appear, and the patterns had changed. The early incidents after mine, Cape Town, Alexandria, Guam, those had been scattered. Different oceans, different operators, no obvious geographic relationship. Random distribution, I'd thought at first. Maybe just a statistical cluster. The kind of coincidence that happens when you've got hundreds of thousands of miles of cable spread across the seafloor. But by the 4th week, the randomness disappeared. Indian Ocean, 3 incidents within 72 hours. Different cables, different operators, but all within a 600 nautical mile radius of the Maldives. Depths ranging from 3,200 to 4,100 meters. Then the Pacific. 5 incidents over 10 days, forming a rough arc from Hawaii southwest toward the Philippines. North Atlantic. 7 incidents in 2 weeks, spreading outward from the mid-Atlantic ridge. I sat at my kitchen table with the spreadsheet open, color-coding the incidents by ocean basin, and felt my stomach drop. They weren't random anymore. The failures were occurring in sequences now. Clusters. Like something was moving through specific regions systematically, working through the infrastructure with purpose. The spacing between incidents within each cluster was shrinking too. 72 hours, then 48, then 36. Whatever was doing this was accelerating. And the damage zones were spreading to new ocean basins simultaneously. I stared at the data, watching the color-coded dots multiply across my mental map of the seafloor. While the Indian Ocean cluster was still active, new incidents started appearing in the South Atlantic. While the Pacific arc continued, the Mediterranean began showing hits. Different regions, same time frame, same damage characteristics. My hands were shaking when I closed the laptop. I understood what this meant. There were more of them now. Had to be. No single organism could cover that much territory that quickly, not with the transit times involved. Either the thing I'd encountered had moved on, and there were others already present in different ocean basins, or they were reproducing. I didn't want to think about that. Didn't want to picture those massive bodies splitting, spawning, sending offspring drifting through the deep ocean currents to establish themselves in new hunting grounds. But the data didn't care what I wanted. I started tracking the repair operations too. Most operators didn't publish detailed technical reports publicly, but I still had contacts throughout the industry. Guys I'd worked with on other vessels. Techs who'd swap information over encrypted channels. I reached out carefully, casually, asking how jobs were going, what kind of damage they were seeing down there. The responses made my chest tight. Every repair crew was encountering the same thing I had: clean cuts, multiple breaks, no environmental cause, and most of them were reporting strange sonar contacts during the work, anomalous readings that disappeared when pursued, interference patterns that didn't match known sources. Some of them were seeing the creatures directly. A tech named Peterson worked for Pacific Subsea out of Singapore, sent me a 3-line message. Saw something at 4,200 meters during TP9 splice work. Bioluminescent, massive, didn't match any known species. Company says equipment malfunction. You ever see anything weird down there? I stared at that message for 20 minutes before deleting it without responding. Because I understood something else now. Something that made the whole situation infinitely worse. They were learning. Every repair crew sent down was teaching them. Teaching them that electromagnetic signatures meant food. Teaching them that the cables carried energy. That cutting them would bring submersibles with batteries and power systems and all that delicious current they fed on. We were training them, conditioning them, turning every repair operation into a feeding opportunity that reinforced the behavior. And they were adapting. The early incidents, mine, Cape Town, Alexandria, those had shown hesitation in the damage patterns, long spacing between cuts, like the creatures were testing, experimenting. But the recent incidents showed tighter spacing, more breaks per affected section, more efficient damage patterns. They were getting better at it, learning which cuts would bring repair crews fastest, which cable types were most vulnerable, which depths were safest for feeding. I tracked each new incident with horrifying clarity, watching the pattern emerge across my spreadsheet like a topographic map of an invasion. Indian Ocean. Incident spacing decreased from 72 hours to 36 hours over 2 weeks. Pacific Arc. Number of breaks per incident increased from 7 to 14. Mediterranean. Damage zones began overlapping, suggesting multiple organisms working the same region. They were coordinating. Had to be. The simultaneous multi-basin incidents weren't coincidence. They were synchronized. The creatures were somehow communicating across thousands of miles of ocean, spreading information, adapting their hunting behavior collectively, spreading across the ocean floor like a network of their own. I stopped sleeping properly around week 5. I'd lie in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about the map, about the clusters spreading and merging, about repair crews descending into the dark with no idea what they were training. Sometimes I'd get up at 3 in the morning and check the alerts again, just to see if another incident had appeared while I was trying to sleep. They always had. I knew I should warn someone, should go public, contact the maritime authorities, reach out to marine biology departments at universities. Send my data to someone who could do something with it. Every time I opened my laptop, I thought about drafting that email, making that call. But Mickey's voice was always there in my head. He'd pulled me aside the day before my medical clearance came through, found me in the mess hall on Ocean Surveyor, sat down across from me with his coffee and his wire-rimmed glasses and his corporate smile. "Good to see you looking healthy," he'd said. "Ready to get back to work?" "Yes, sir." "Good. Good." He'd sipped his coffee. "Catherine mentioned you'd been asking questions about the TAT-14 incident, about what you saw down there." My throat had gone dry, just trying to understand what happened. What happened is, you completed an emergency repair under difficult conditions and experienced some equipment malfunctions that caused sensory anomalies. The medical team confirmed it. Combination of fatigue, pressure effects, and instrument interference. Nothing to be concerned about. Right. Your career with this company has been exemplary, Caden. 15 years of outstanding service. You're one of our most experienced deep-sea specialists. He'd leaned forward slightly. I'd hate to see that reputation damaged by unfounded speculation about unverified phenomena. The industry is small, word gets around, and companies don't hire techs who file reports about sea monsters. He'd smiled when he said it, friendly, reasonable. Do we understand each other? I'd understood perfectly. So the cables kept getting repaired. Crews kept descending. The creatures kept learning, kept spreading, kept severing infrastructure with increasing efficiency. And I kept my mouth shut, kept my head down, kept my career intact. I closed the laptop and sat in the dark. Somewhere in the crushing darkness 4,000 meters below the surface, in the Indian Ocean and the Pacific and the Atlantic and the Mediterranean, in trenches and abyssal plains I'd never seen and never would. They were waiting, learning, hunting. And nobody was going to stop them, because I was too much of a coward to say anything.